Yes. Well, first of all the sanctuaries already have the heart. They have
Yeah.
200% of the heart. That's why they're doing what they
Yeah.
do. Um, and when I wake up in the morning, sitting behind a computer looking at spreadsheets all day isn't necessarily even my idea of fun, although I do love a spreadsheet. But when I wake up, it's what am I going to do for animals today? And that's where the heart kind of comes in with me. That's what gets me out of bed and gets me in front of the computer and makes every little task, because grant writing is so detail oriented, totally worth it.
Welcome to the Better Life for Animals podcast, where we amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. Through powerful stories and expert insights, we shine a light on the efforts to rescue, protect, and advocate for animals. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. Every follower helps us reach more people. And support animal sanctuaries. Enjoy the conversation.
Today's guest is Stephanie Mathers, founder and CEO of Grants for Animals, where she helps animal sanctuaries and rescue organizations become truly grant ready so that they can secure the funding they need to thrive. After 2 decades in education and a lifetime of animal advocacy, Stephanie has helped animal nonprofits win and manage millions of dollars in grants, blending sharp strategy with deep compassion for the beings at the heart of this work. She now works with sanctuaries and animal welfare groups across the country, offering both hands-on grant writing and practical training so more teams have the skills to sustain their life-saving missions. Stephanie, thank you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I love that you're working with sanctuaries, since you know this is the focus that we care so much about here at Better Life for Animals. Maybe you could tell me when you became focused on sanctuaries.
So, my focus on sanctuaries actually happened before I ever thought I could have a career becoming a grant writer for animals. It was after I moved to Utah and I became vegan, and I just really wanted to find a way to put all of the things that I was starting to put into place in terms of my diet also into action for the animals, and which is the whole reason why I changed my entire lifestyle. So I started looking around to see what kind of sanctuaries there were in my area, and there did happen to be one. At the time, it was called Ching Farm Sanctuary, and it's currently called Clementine Ranch. If anybody wants to check them out, they're doing amazing work. So I reached out, and sanctuaries almost always need volunteers. And what they really need are volunteers that can commit weekly. So I ended up arranging to come and basically just clean water dishes and do all of the work that has to be done on a daily basis. And I did that weekly. And then as I was showing up weekly, sometimes it can be challenging for sanctuaries to find reliable volunteers. So the director basically said, "You are here every week. What else can you do?" I said, "I can write anything that you want. I'm an English teacher." That's what I was doing at the time. And it just went from there. But pretty much sanctuaries, working with Ching Farm at the time, and then all the experiences that I've had with sanctuaries, it gives you a meaningful one-on-one experience with specific animals, learning their stories, interacting with them, and just seeing that they're just amazing emotional beings like we are. They're no different from our dogs and our cats. And that was all the way back in 2012. And that's when I really got hooked on working with sanctuaries, and everything kind of built from there.
Wonderful. It just makes me so glad to know there's someone out there working in this field, because what I've heard is that this is a tough time to be in the grant space, and especially when we're talking about animals that are part of the food system. So, how do you overcome that?
Great question. So first, just to reinforce the statement of the problem that you just made, the grant world right now is in flux, although thankfully most animal welfare organizations are not impacted by everything going on the federal level. those of us working with sanctuaries, we've always been reliant on our community foundations and family foundations and smaller funders. Most sanctuaries don't even get federal grants. So the great news is we're not really impacted by that. However, within the animal welfare and especially the vegan community, there has been a movement where a lot of our big funders have said they don't want to fund sanctuary work. They want to fund food systems change, advocacy, open rescue, and other things. And that's been a bit of a blow to the sanctuary community because sanctuaries are where people have those one-on-one experiences with animals. We know we can't rescue our way out of everything going on with animals, but sanctuaries still have a vital role in humane education, in veterinary care for large animals. For all of those reasons, sanctuaries are so important. So it definitely is a very, very challenging time. The good news is there are a lot of ways to hack things, and there absolutely are grants out there for sanctuaries. I have clients that are sanctuaries, and we are funding 20% of their operating budget or more with grants. So it's about finding the right grants, how to tell your story, and approaching the right funders that are really going to resonate with your work. And I can, of course, do a deep dive on any of those things.
Well, I think that's a great idea, actually, to do a deep dive because I would love to hear the whole process. This is such a great thing that you're doing for sanctuary. So let's imagine that you're starting with, a small sanctuary and they're trying to make a go of it. They're trying to be sustainable. How would it start? Take us through it.
Great question. So one of the reasons why I'm obsessed with grants is that when you become grant ready and you start going after grants, it actually forces your organization to get all of your systems and processes in place. So when you start to be able to earn grants, that means you've curated other funding streams, your financials are on point, you have the right policies and procedures, and you are basically operating your nonprofit as if it's a business, which is really what needs to be done for a nonprofit to be sustainable over the long run. So when I start working with an organization, the first thing we're doing is actually something called grant readiness. And if you're wanting to do more research after this podcast, you can Google that term and you will find so many resources out there. So grant readiness sometimes takes 1 month if it's a really established organization and they've already put a lot of things into place. Sometimes it takes 6 months. And that's when we're curating all the financials, making sure there's policies. So for sanctuaries, there are things like animal intake, euthanasia policy, animal census of tracking all the animals, things that may never have been formalized, but they need to get there. So we basically get the organization totally grant ready, however long that takes. And as we're doing that, we are writing a lot of boilerplate type of language. So language that can be used for a variety of different grants and for a variety of different programs. And then once we've done that is when we actually start the research process where we're trying to find those great fit grants for a sanctuary based on the work they're doing. And one thing that's really important for any sanctuaries, if you might be listening to this and you haven't really gotten started with grants, when you're starting, there is no grant that's too small. $1,000, that's a great way to build your history with grants and to show that you can responsibly manage grants because everybody wants a grant. Why wouldn't you? It's basically money that you do not have to pay back. But what a lot of organizations don't realize is because of that, you're more vetted with grants than you are with anything, maybe even more than things like loans, because those grantors want to make sure that when they're giving you the money, you're going to responsibly steward it and report out on it correctly and things like that. So when you're first starting, there are a lot of amazing smaller grants, especially within vegan organizations and sanctuaries that don't look at it and think, oh, $500. I mean, that's not that much. It's great to start with those smaller ones, and then you can be building to $10,000, $15,000, $20,000.
So what I'm hearing is that perhaps you're an overworked sanctuary group here and you're thinking, I don't have time to spend all this paperwork in order to maybe get $500. But what I'm hearing you say, Stephanie, is that no, you're getting yourself grant ready, which means that you have everything in place for that one, which might be where all the work, the front load work is. But that with that in place, then you become ready for the next one and the next one, and you're basically just setting yourself up for success.
Yes. And the first grants that any organization goes after, they're heavier lifts because you're getting all of these things together. And for that reason, I always recommend mentally commit to 12 to 18 months of grant work. Not that that's 40 hours a week for 12 months or anything like that. Maybe you just have 5 hours to give each month. That is a completely great number to actually start getting ready with grants and just say, all right, I'm going to do 5 hours each month for 12 months. And then near the end of that 12 months is you can really see what you were able to accomplish and how much you were able to get funded. But sometimes where I see organizations stumble is they're overworked, they don't have a lot of bandwidth, they go after one grant and they hear no, and they get really frustrated because they put a lot of work into it and they give up. And that's one of the things that I always coach organizations not to do. Don't ever just go after one grant because the truth is, no one gets 100% of the grants that they apply for. I don't. You're going to hear no. It's kind of the nature of grant writing.
So does grants for animals, are you working strictly as a consultant, or do you actually get in there and help them go, here's some grants I think that'll work for you? How involved does grants for animals get?
So we have different things that we do depending on who we're working with. We do
Okay.
have a small group of full service clients, and that includes vegan sanctuaries. And for the groups that we do full service grant writing with, we do all of the grant readiness, all the research, the applications. And by the way, a grant doesn't stop when you get the check in the mail because then you have to implement what you said you wanted to do. You have to communicate back to your funders and do reporting. So we actually support with all of that for a very small group of clients. But then there are also sanctuaries that maybe have gotten one or two grants in the past, but they need a refresh. They need to know where to look and what to look for. So we'll do just a research block and then give it to their grant writer so they can take that and run with it. Or we'll just do a consulting session where we talk about how to get grant ready and give them some resources. And just as a quick plug, I am not affiliated with the Open Sanctuary Project, but if you are a sanctuary and you are looking for a treasure trove of resources that help with grant readiness and everything else, you can check out the Open Sanctuary Project. They have their website, and everything on there is basically free for sanctuaries.
Excellent. I hear you talk often about, head and heart, in your work. And what does that look like on a day-to-day basis, is when you're partnering with a sanctuary that once again, because it's just so true, where they're overwhelmed and under-resourced. How do we manage both, all of us?
Yes. Well, first of all the sanctuaries already have the heart. They have 200% of the heart. That's why they're doing what they
Yeah.
do. Um, and when I wake up in the morning, sitting behind a computer looking at spreadsheets all day isn't necessarily even my idea of fun, although I do love a spreadsheet. But when I wake up, it's what am I going to do for animals today? And that's where the heart kind of comes in with me. That's what gets me out of bed and gets me in front of the computer and makes every little task, because grant writing is so detail oriented, totally worth it. So sanctuaries, they already have the heart. A lot of people get into sanctuary work because they've seen firsthand things that are going on with animal welfare and animal suffering, and they want to make a difference. Or sometimes I've found animals are just finding these people that then end up thinking, well, I have to start a sanctuary. So they already have the heart. But not many people get into sanctuaries thinking about running their nonprofit like a business or really having things organized. And they may not even have that background where they used bookkeeping software and they were managing email lists. But all of those things are important. So that's what I try to bring to the table. And I think it's good for every single nonprofit working in animal welfare. Have at least one person like that on your team, somebody who likes numbers, likes data, likes spreadsheets, and there is a connection. The most important thing to know is sometimes the people who are working in the more cerebral realm, it's like, oh gosh, why are you doing this? it's for the animals. So if you can always just remember that connection, and you really have to have both the head and the heart to be extremely successful with all nonprofit income streams, but especially with grants.
You're listening to Better Life for Animals podcast. Our mission is to amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. But we can't do it alone. We need your help. First of all, go ahead and subscribe to this channel wherever you're watching or listening. And then get involved by visiting betterlifeforanimals.com. That's betterlifeforanimals.com. Be sure to check out our blog, learn more about incredible sanctuaries, and explore our book section, where 100% of net proceeds from book sales are donated to sanctuaries. Every action you take helps to make a difference. And remember, subscribe to this channel. And now, back to the show.
If you're just joining us, we are speaking with Stephanie Mathers, and she is with Grants for Animals. I am so taken with the fact that there's a shift to money going toward other areas of the movement overall, such as food system and things like that. And I think that I can understand it, but I also know that if we don't connect with the animals as they are in their natural state as people, that I worry that we may be conveniently handed, a cruelty-free option without going down that road of why we wouldn't want to be cruel in the first place. So I'd love to explore that more about just how important sanctuaries are, what role they play. They're not just a place where we hold a few rescued animals. They are serving humanity. I wonder what you think about that.
Well, absolutely. And, without diving down a huge rabbit hole of woo-woo, which I definitely have that part of, there's a part of me with that. Sanctuaries are holding an energetic space for what we want the world to be, right? And how we want compassion to actually manifest in our society. And so sanctuaries are doing things that cannot even be measured just by being here, and by doing the work that they do. But to get a little bit more technical, some of the things that sanctuaries are doing that actually can help them when they're talking about grants. First of all, many times sanctuaries are doing things that municipal and county shelters absolutely require. So, for example, with pigs, there are many pet pig owners who surrender their pigs. And if there is no one to take those pigs from a county shelter, I won't tell you, we won't talk about what happens, but people can email me if they want the details, but it's not good. It depends on the state that you're in. Same with animals like goats and horses. There are no options when those owners surrender their animals to a municipal or county shelter, and they do end up there. Sanctuaries provide that safety net. So sanctuaries are a place where those county and municipal organizations can reach out to and actually find a safe landing place for those animals. Also, we have humane education programs, which are a very attractive type of program for grants. Many of the sanctuaries I've worked with, the first grants they earn are for those humane education programs. Disaster preparedness and response. When there are things like wildfires and floods, often animals have to be temporarily housed somewhere. These could be owned animals, they could be animals from other sanctuaries, they could even be wild animals. And many sanctuaries have additional pastures or extra space where they can actually foster these larger animals until it's safe for them to go back to where they have originally been housed or been placed. So all of those are things that sanctuaries do, and we haven't even really talked about the magical one-on-one experiences that people have. I mean, if you speak to people who became vegan, a huge percentage of those individuals will say they had a meaningful experience with the farmed animal. They fell in love with the cow or something like that. And that's why they changed their entire lifestyle. So if there isn't a place for people to go and have those meaningful experiences, then what are we doing? Just finding different ways to make plant-based hamburgers, and there is definitely a place for that, but it's so important to have both. And I will say to encourage the sanctuaries, it is not every funder. It's just some of the really big name funders who have been at major conferences year over year, such as the Animal and Vegan Advocacy Summit, which, by the way, is a great conference to go to if you're working as a sanctuary. But they have come out and said that. So but that doesn't apply to every single funder. There are still plenty of people who want to support the work of sanctuaries.
I would love to get a couple examples where you had mentioned how more than anything else, turning over, your heart to an actual farmed animal changes, your perspective on what you're eating. Do you have any examples or success stories that you could share?
Well, I think one success story that is kind of out there, and I'm not sure if Renee has been on the podcast, but Rowdy Girl Sanctuary. So, Rowdy Girl, there is a documentary and a book coming out. And basically, she was a cattle rancher and just started having, emotional relationships with her cows, and now is a huge vegan advocate running a sanctuary, and now works with actual ranchers to try to get them to consider rethinking what they're doing. So, I mean, that is a pretty extreme example because you have somebody actually working in the industry, the meat industry, becoming one of the most outspoken vegan advocates I've ever met, because I did have a chance to meet her in person at the last AVA summit. Um, but then I will just say, on a more personal level, I have, quote unquote, dragged many a boyfriend or friend to a sanctuary to do some volunteer work or to take a tour. I had a significant other go with me to Charlie's Acres in California, which is an amazing farm sanctuary. And that person became vegan and did not stop being vegan after that experience of meeting all those animals, interacting with them, and just seeing their emotional lives. So those are just kind of two examples. And I think so many people who have become vegan or work in this area have stories of even the people that would come to a sanctuary that you would think that person, no matter what we do or say, they're never going to rethink how they've been conditioned, and then they do.
I'm a big believer in starting young and getting children to participate in this because they don't know yet really what they're eating.
Hmm.
They have an opportunity that kind of has been trained out of us as adults to think about and to care. So I love the idea of the humane education piece and the idea that there's a lot of grant money out there that's available in that area, because I can't think of anything more important than education.
Yes, humane education programs are so amazing. And for sanctuaries out there, sometimes you have a bigger organization that wants to do humane education of all species, and you can actually partner with them. So let's say your organization, let's say you're a pig sanctuary. This is from an actual example. You don't have the bandwidth to have a whole humane education program on your own, just for whatever reasons. So there are statewide humane societies that do humane education, and maybe they do dogs and cats only because that's what they have at their organization. So this example in Arizona, there was a pig sanctuary that said, hey, we're going to partner with our local humane society for their humane ed program so kids can experience more than just cats and dogs. And they take some of their piggies in and do a whole presentation on one of the days with the humane education program at the larger organization. So whatever species you work with, there are definitely organizations that want to give kids opportunities to experience those other species. And so you can definitely try to do partnerships, but also just to emphasize, like you said, children are completely open. I mean, that's one of the reasons I loved being in education. Even teenagers are much more malleable than adults. They just haven't been set into the matrix of society and what's been told to them about what they should eat and the quote unquote food pyramid and things like that. So when you bring groups of kids to a farm sanctuary for humane education for field trips, you're going to make such a huge impact. And those kids they love animals. They're curious about them. They want to interact with them. And yeah, having had the opportunity to watch some humane education programs in person, it is really magical. And the way kids interact with animals is so intuitive and pure. I mean, even older kids, 12, 15, 18, it's really special to see.
Well, as a former educator yourself, did you find it challenging to be able to reinforce what you might have learned while going to a sanctuary when you come back, to the cafeteria or to the books that are available? There's a lot of pressure there to go back to the way you were, whereas, so I hate to see this opportunity, not acted upon.
That's true. And having also been a principal and having to manage what happens in the cafeteria, there are just so many things that go on in schools that are really unfortunate. So just as one example, every child has to take a milk who gets a lunch provided by the school. They have to take a milk, even if they're lactose intolerant. And then they can put it back if they're not going to use it, but it's just part of, dairy subsidies. So there's all these levels of depth of where, you know, things that have happened in agriculture are basically forced upon kids in schools. At the same time, I do think there's this phrase actually in financial education, more is caught than taught. What kids may be told explicitly doesn't always sink in as much as what kids actually experience. So the experience with a sheep or a goat or a chicken at a sanctuary, well, it may only be 45 minutes to an hour compared to everything else that children are given in schools. The time of the experience and the frequency doesn't always matter. Sometimes you just have those core memories and those core experiences that can really change somebody's life. And I remember back when I was a teacher, I had a leadership group and I took them down to Ching Farm Sanctuary just as a fun field trip. And several of those kids became vegan or vegetarian. And one of them I'm still in touch with. She's 20 or 21. She's about to get married. She's still a vegetarian after going to that farm sanctuary. So you really just never know.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about how we can help you in your getting the word out there. How can sanctuaries reach out for you, and what kind of programs do you offer so that we could get you some business? Because I think we need people like you.
Thank you. So we have a lot of free resources at Grants for Animals, and some of them include a free newsletter that will send out grant leads. I also just love to talk about grants, as you can tell. And so on all of my socials, I'll post reels and post tips related to grants. And they're not all specific to sanctuaries. Some are related to other types of animal welfare organizations. However, there's a lot out there. And then we also have paid services. And I will say right now, there is a drought of grant writers working in animal welfare. So we are quite busy. And if there are any of your listeners who think, hey, I would actually love to become a grant writer for animal nonprofits, please reach out to me. We're always looking to build our team, but it's just kind of such a niche thing. I mean, I basically tell people I just made up what I wanted to do. And when I was telling people in my family that I was going to become a grant writer for animals, I mean, they were like, well, we're not going to help you when you're homeless on the streets and have no money. But it ended up that there was an incredible demand. So I don't just help sanctuaries, I also help people who want to learn how to be a grant writer, because the truth is, I can't write everybody's grants. I would if I could, but there are not enough hours in the day. So I'm always looking to help other people learn how to do that. Finally, I love speaking to different groups of sanctuaries, and I do it just because I love it at no cost. So I recently had a webinar with this group called the Pig Sanctuary Collective, which they are completely amazing, all pig people from across the country and some even international. And I just, talked for an hour with them about grants and grants specific to pig sanctuaries. And I've done that with Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, Homes for Horses. But if you have a group, if anyone listening has a group that would love to hear more about grants specific to their missions, I would love to come and talk to your group virtually or in person.
That's a great offer. I am so taken by the fact that you said earlier in the talk that, it takes 8 months to get this thing rolling. But if you find yourself at a standstill, or if you've got some challenges, if you can see yourself still, viable for that short term, it sounds like getting grant writing as part of in your wheelhouse is imperative, because it could make all the difference for the sustainability of your future sanctuary.
Yes, I think grant writing is a huge component, but I do want to say grant writing will never be a magic wand, especially in animal welfare. It is probably not going to fund 100% of your operations. And I say that because when people hear grants, they do sometimes think that. They just think, oh, if I could just get some grants. But the truth is, grants are not going to fund it all. So, just as an example, if you think about your operating budget, 100,000, 200,000, whatever it takes to run your sanctuary for 1 year, think about 10 to 20% to start. So when you're first starting grant writing, you should be able to get about 10 to 20% of your operating budget covered. Now, I have a lot of clients where we're at 40, 50, even more than 50% of an operating budget, but that's over 2 or 3 years of working together and really curating grants. But while you're doing the grant things, it is so important to think about all your different income streams. So, do you have regular donors? Do you have a monthly giving or a sponsorship program? Are you collecting emails for an email list? Social media fundraisers? Maybe you sell sanctuary swag. All of those things, it's really important to have a very diversified list of income streams for your organization, because grants will never be that like the total income that you receive.
This has been such a great conversation, Stephanie. Is there anything I'm missing, anything that you would like to add before we say goodbye?
Oh gosh, there's always so many things, but I just want to first of all thank every single sanctuary person who is listening to this, because you are doing work that so many people just don't even have the emotional ability to do, let alone the commitment to commit your lives to the animals you're caring for. So thank you so much if you are doing that work. And I would love to support you or to point you in the directions of whoever could support you. But also, grants can be very scary and intimidating, and you never want to put one more thing on your plate. But I truly do think going after grants is a great way to try to make your organization more sustainable. And it's always a good time. I mean, when we're taping this right now, end of 2025, this is a great time to start because you can plan out your entire year. But also, in the spring is a good time to start. In the fall is a good time to start. You just have to get it in motion because it is such a long-term income stream and a long-term effort. So it's always a great time, and I encourage anybody who's working with the sanctuary to start looking into it.
Tell us how to find you, Stephanie.
I am at grantsforanimals.com, and that's grants, then the number 4 animals. I'm also at Grants for Animals on all socials. I'm most active posting on Facebook and Instagram. I also do have a LinkedIn and just started a TikTok, but I need to find a 20-something-year-old to mentor me on that. So there are no posts yet.
Thank you, Stephanie. This has been such a fabulous conversation for our sanctuary owners. I know they're all going to get so much benefit out of this. And this is Better Life for Animals. And if you have enjoyed the podcast, please like and subscribe so that we can create a better life for animals.
Thank you for joining us on the Better Life for Animals podcast. Together, we can create a world where all beings are treated with dignity, respect, and care. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening. It helps us reach more people and spread awareness about the incredible work happening in animal sanctuaries. You can also share this episode with friends and fellow advocates to keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep speaking up, taking action, and making a difference for the animals.